Arthur Blind Blake claimed Jacksonville as home, and his blues song trace a path across the country from West Coast blues to Georgia Bound. By the time of his death at age 38, he'd recorded an estimated 80 tracks. Joining us to discuss the 100th anniversary of that musical milestone, we're joined by Adonica Toller, Museum Director of the Eartha M.M. White Historical Museum and Garden. Adonica, welcome back.
Good morning. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you for being here. We also welcome back to the program Tim Gilmore, author, educator, and historian at Jack Psycho Geo. Good morning, Tim.
Hey, Ann.
Well, this is a legacy that is well worth remembering, and I'm glad that you're both here to help us do it. Blind Blake is really one of the most revered and distinctive guitarists of the era. But in some ways, Adonica, it seems like he's a little bit emblematic of La Villa itself, the community, because he's kind of mythologized, influential, but in some ways not fully perhaps documented, fully appreciated.
Blind Blake definitely lived the mysterious life. There's eras of his life we don't know exactly where he was. There's even kind of controversy about where he actually was born. Maybe Newport News, Virginia is another area. But he did live here, and he was influenced by the whole culture that was here in Jacksonville, especially in La Villa on Ashley Street.
Yeah. Ashley Street Blues is one of his most well-known songs, and I just want to start off here by taking a little listen to it.
If you ain't got no man, I'll give you one of mine.
Tim Gilmore, Blind Blake is a favorite subject of yours. You recently wrote a post on Jack's Psycho Geo that really follows the theme of what Jack Psycho Geo is, which is, mapping these physical places that evoke a history and an identity in some ways. Tell us a little bit about, first of all, just the map of Blind Blake in Jacksonville. What do we know about where he was, what he did when he was here, what he touched?
Well, as Adonica pointed out, he is in a lot of ways a mysterious kind of figure. People have wondered all sorts of things about, the details of his life, and there are conflicting narratives about particular things. But one of the things that really interests me is the fact that you can look at city directories and you can listen to his songs. You can listen to the lyrics of his songs. Look at the names of his songs. We just heard Ashley Street Blues. I mean, Ashley Street was, the center of everything that was going on musically in La Villa. He lived in a lot of places across Jacksonville. He has, there's a song called Stonewall Street Blues. I drove past Stonewall Street on the way here this morning. It's in Brooklyn. He actually lived, and if you look at city directories, he lived with two different women on two different sides of Stonewall Street. He was married 5 times that we know of.
Wow.
So there's Stonewall Street Blues. You can listen to the lyrics of it, whether or not they are actually autobiographical or fictional, who knows? But he lived with, his second and his third wife on Stonewall Street. There's another song called Tampa Bound that talks about the creek flooding, and Stonewall Street backs up to McCoy's Creek. And if you've been in Jacksonville for a little while, McCoy's Creek floods a lot. And 100 years ago, it flooded way worse than it floods now. And he talks about, he says, the bridge is washed out, the wires are all down, my gal is in the flood, and I'm Tampa bound. So, again, you can't necessarily know that those are autobiographical lines, but Jacksonville streets are all over the place in his music.
Well, that's a great way to set up another song that I'd like to play. The last song that we played, Ashley Street Blues, that was performed by Leola Wilson. But this one, Tampa Bound, is performed and sung by him. So let's take a listen to Tampa Bound.
I'm going back to Tampa, to that girl I left behind. I'm going back to Tampa, to that girl I left behind. I'm going back to Tampa, just to kill my worried mind. Did you ever lie down at night thinking about your bride? Did you ever lie down at night thinking about your bride? You come it rolling and tumbling, I guess I'm Tampa bound. A bridge washed out.
So great style there. What do we know about Blind Blake's influence musically, Adonica, when it comes to his role? I mean, this was a time when a lot of Black musicians were performing, particularly in that La Villa area, that community. It wasn't always translating into mainstream culture.
Well, he is considered the king of ragtime, and even though he played the guitar, it was stated that he played the guitar as if he was playing the piano. And there's even quotes where listeners say they swear they can hear other instruments while he's playing. His Dylan actually in 1992 covered one of Blind Blake's song, and there's even a literature written about the main character seeking where Blind Blake would have performed. So, and that's in 1992. Then in 2000. So there's a actual series you can watch of a character seeking the spots that Blind Blake would have played. So you have major guitarists who study him even now, and other people they're amazed at how skilled he was. There's like, he had to have picks, he had to have been doing this, because as they attempt to follow his lead, they're like, how was he doing that? So he impacted blues, jazz, ragtime. Right before ragtime became really ragtime, Blind Blake was leading that.
Remind us about the era, particularly in that Ashley Street era where your museum is, the Eartha M.M. White. There was all kinds of theaters. It was a hub of Black culture. It was a destination for artists and performers from across the country.
And actually, the Clara White Mission building was the Globe Theater, which in of itself was the anchor in the Southern music community. So what will become later called the Chitlin Circuit, if you were a Black entertainer, you were coming through the Globe Theater. You also was coming through the Colored Air Dome, which was down the street. And prior to the Globe Theater, there was the Bijou. And the Bijou was opened in 1908. Frank Crowd. It closed in 1909. He repurposed it and opened the Globe Theater. And so it was the place that you were going to come through as a Black entertainer. So Ashley Street was really, and it was advertised in the Chicago Defender. It was known that if you're going to come to Jacksonville, you're probably going through the Globe Theater.
Yeah. Tim, remind us some of the artists that came through there. I mean, some of them certainly are names that are part of history, perhaps a little bit more than Blind Blake. Jelly Roll Morton,
right?
Ma Rainey,
Yep.
kind of the mother of the blues.
Those were two of the people I was going to say. Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, of course, everybody talks about Ray Charles having later, of course, been in La Villa, but a lot of this was really early in recording history, and so one of the things that's incredible about Blind Blake is that we can actually hear him, because while Ma Rainey recorded and Jelly Roll Morton recorded, certainly there are so many musicians that did not record. There was someone named Butler May who went by the name String Beans in the 19-teens, and he was known all over the country. One of the most famous musicians at the time, but he never recorded. He actually died in Jacksonville. But Blind Blake, he was here at least. As Adonica said, it's we don't know for sure where he's from. All the promotional material at the time said he was from Jacksonville, but he was probably born elsewhere. But he had been here for a number of years when, 100 years ago, 1926, he went up to Chicago, and Paramount had something called Race Records, and he started recording. Ashley Street Blues was one of the first songs, and he recorded a number of songs then with Leola Wilson also, who also went by the name Coop Brandt. She was from Birmingham, Alabama. So the fact that he recorded, and that he recorded a good bit. I mean, he's pretty prolific.
Very prolific.
Yeah, and we can listen back 100 years and hear him. It's pretty remarkable.
He was so successful. His first album, the 1926, it was so successful that they was, we got to find some other Blind Blakes. We got to find some more artists. So he really impacted the development of ragtime, blues, and jazz. He influenced all the musical forms because of his skill in playing that guitar like he was playing the piano.
And kind of a consummate entertainer, right? He was known for being very affable, very funny, engaging, and obviously a very good voice. If you're just joining us, we are talking about the legacy of Arthur Blind Blake here in Jacksonville. It's 100 years since he started recording in 1926. We're talking to historians Adonica Toller and Tim Gilmore. If you have a comment or a question, or just like to join our conversation on air, you can call 904-549-2937. Or you can go to firstcoastconnect.org to find other ways that you can connect with us. You mentioned the Bob Dylan cover song, and that is, one mark of his influence on larger popular culture. This was the You Gonna Quit Me, which was a cover of You Gonna Quit Me Blues, and it appeared, as you said, on his 1992 album. But he's also been covered by Ry Cooder, Taj Mahal, Leon Redbone, and so his musical influence stretches to today. But at the time, this really was when we were hearing the voice of Black Jacksonville on a format that could traverse the country. It was really for the first time. This was encapsulating the sound and, in many ways, the spirit of the cultural scene in what's often known as the Harlem of the South. Adonica, this was the first time people were able to kind of hear that and have it travel around. And as you say, spread that influence.
Correct. So I don't think people really understand how impactful Ashley Street was, and La Villa was, and even out east, because there's some of that. But it just as today you have musicians who are still studying people. Of course, we have the Johnson brothers, and you got George Leofhard and Leofhard. So it's so much. And the Ma Rainey, Pat Chappelle. Ma Rainey became Ma Rainey because she married Pa Rainey, who was one of the performers in Rabbit's Foot, which was founded in La Villa. And Rabbit's Foot still exists. It's now in Mississippi, but its roots were right here. And Pat Chappelle was a Broadway performer at the same time that the Johnson brothers were. So they knew each other. So that impact. So that's where also now the conversation is that Harlem was La Villa North, because so much La Villa went to New York. And not only that, they were part of the Renaissance. they changed it, they formed it, they shaped it, they made a great impact that now we're still listening. Blind Blake. Now, most people are not familiar with him, but true musicians, especially guitarists, know who he is.
And we know too that his influence wasn't just something that was being felt elsewhere. There were musicians coming through here, as we mentioned. Ultimately people like Cab Calloway, Ella Fitzgerald, Duke Ellington, Billie Holiday, all coming through this area, and you know, having some exposure to that sound, possibly even meeting Blind Blake or playing with him. I mean, we don't know. Again, there's a lot of, we don't know. But he had a relatively short career when it comes down to it. I mean, we didn't hear anything of him essentially until 1920s, and then he kind of disappeared in the early 1930s.
Right. Yeah. And, a lot of those musicians that you mentioned came slightly later than he was when he was here and when he was recording. Excuse me. There's another musician named Sugar Underwood who recorded some songs. Also some songs with Jacksonville street names, the Dewdrop Alley Stomp and Davis Street Blues.
Davis Street Blues, yeah.
And Dewdrop Alley was in a part of town called Hansontown, and Blind Blake actually lived a block or two away from him at one point. Hansontown is mostly now where downtown campus of FSCJ is, but
another casualty of urban renewal.
Yes, absolutely. But it's true. So he recorded a lot for just a few years, and there's this whole kind of mythos of blues musicians a lot of time, and there's so many blind blues musicians that blindness became part of the mythos, and the fact that there were so many questions about him and what happened to him also kind of kept his biography, I think, interesting in people's minds. So there was another musician, Blind Gary Davis, thought that Blind Blake had been run over by a train.
Right.
And Big Bill Brunsey thought that he had fallen over drunk in a blizzard and froze to death. Neither of those things are true. So there were all of these different Blind Blakes that kind of fed the mystery, And it's only been a couple of years that somebody tracked down his death certificate. He had been, when he went up to play in Chicago, to record in Chicago, for a couple of years, he would come back and forth from Chicago to Jacksonville, and there's actually a couple of songs that kind of refer to his going back and forth. A song called That'll Never Happen No More does, for example. But Paramount would put its so-called race records artists up in housing in Milwaukee. And he settled in Milwaukee finally, and he married his last wife, Beatrice. And he died from tuberculosis. He had not performed in a couple of years, and he was buried in an unmarked grave and kind of forgotten. His music survived, but there were all these questions about what happened to him, and again, that kind of fed the mystery, the mythology, so to speak, of Blind Blake.
And folks watching our live stream will see that there is now a marker on
Yes,
that
there
grave.
is.
Somebody did go ahead and put one there. You mentioned that the mystery surrounding his death carried on his legacy in some ways. And Adonica sort of alluded to this earlier, but he's in a fictionalized way in a character in the TV series and the book that stars the character Jack Reacher, which is called Reacher on TV, but the book is called Killing Floor. And essentially his character inspires the action, someone searching for Blind Blake and the legacy of Blind Blake. I do want to go ahead and mention a note we got on Facebook from Jason saying, love this segment. I listen to Blind Blake regularly. The Eartha M.M. White Museum is a gem in La Villa. Everyone should visit it. I want to listen to another segment of a song by Blind Blake. This one's called The Southern Rag Geechee, and then I want to come back and talk a little bit about it and what he's singing about. So let's take a listen.
Now we're going to do the dance now. They call it the Geechee dance. some music you call the Geechee music now.
One of the things that Blind Blake was known for was this incredibly intricate picking style where he would kind of keep the rhythm with his thumb and then he would use his fingers to pick out this very rapid sometimes and very complicated tune that he would play. But this song in particular is in some ways a nod to his connection. And again, we don't know a lot about it, but possibly to the Sea Islands and the Geechee Gullah community and that dialect, Adonica.
Yes. So, and what the other thing about the Gullah Geechee, so Jacksonville is a part of that. So it would have been
Remind us who the Gullah Geechee
so the
are.
Gullah Geechee, so it's a combination, a culture, a combination of African, Portuguese, French, English combination. It was almost like a communication among the slaves. You're from another region, I'm from another region. We figure out how to communicate, and it formed a whole culture of food, dance, communication, even how you build your home, how you fish, how you farm. So it's a whole thing, and really the whole coast from North Carolina down to Palm Coast now. And Jacksonville and really Florida was greatly inundated when you think about the enslaved that made it to Florida, because the Spanish would not send the enslaved back to wherever they came from once they hit the Florida territory. And one of my colleagues in South Florida has documented there were 100 maroon communities in Florida. So that's the former enslaved making their way to Florida to live out in the woods somewhere, maybe among the native Indians or right outside of a plantation. They're just right. You can't reach them, but they're there. And so that would have been his influence. And Jacksonville is, even right now in Jacksonville, there are Gullah Geechee communities in Arlington, Coswell, also where JU is, also where the Regency Square Mall is, Mandarin. So there's, and others, there's several. So he's very well could have been influenced. And even when you hear him talk, how he sung, how he talked, you could tell he's definitely influenced by that culture.
Slipping into a little of that
Slipping
dialect.
that dialect,
Mhm.
correct.
Yeah. Tim Gilmore, I just want to ask you about that because that is something that you point out in your writings about Blind Blake on your blog.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard to add much to what Adonica said, but it is. I think it's really significant that Jacksonville is this kind of southern terminus of the Gullah Geechee trail that goes into. There's not much left of it, but there was this town called Cosmo in the Arlington area, and now there is there's a sign. In the Fort Caroline area that identifies Cosmo. The Gullah Geechee are fascinating. My understanding is part of what kind of kept their culture intact was their separateness in being coastal, so that cultural isolation kept a lot of things sort of intact. So the fact that in Southern Rag, Blake is, at one point he says, "Go on, old Geechee, ain't studying about you," and then he talks about we're going to do the Geechee dance, and he talks about Geechee music. I don't know. There may very well be, but I don't know of other music that's actually recorded from this time period that mentions Gullah Geechee. I could be wrong, and maybe somebody out there knows, or maybe Adonica knows. I don't know.
You're
But
right. I haven't come across anything, but you're right. We don't know, but we know Blind Blake made mention of it.
absolutely.
We
Yeah.
also got a question just about, could you mention the importance of Genevars Hall? We haven't discussed that. Is that something that we can talk a little bit about?
Sure. Genevars Hall actually was initially, and I just did some research. Jerry Urso, as you know.
Oh yeah. Who's
We're
been on the
often
program recently?
we were often on the phone talking, and we came across someone we were helping with their family history. We may believe that their family member may have owned the original land that sold it to the family
Wow.
that built Genevieve's Hall. So that's like, and we were like, I love this. But Genevieve's Hall, it was
This is one building that still stands
standing.
today.
It still stands today. It's gutted out. There had been attempts to restore it, but
Is it on Jefferson Street?
it is on Ashley Street. It's right across
The
from
corner
Mission-
of
the corner Jefferson
and Ashley. Okay.
So there have been efforts to restore it. That building is very important because it had been a furniture store. It had been it was not born. It was built in 1895, and it was run by a Jewish hall. Now, Genevieve is also someone who gave land to Eartha White to build the school out at Bayard. So that's another story. But they were, because of that, they stayed connected, and so Jennifer Hall ended up being the Lenape Bar, Wynn Hotel. That is where Ray Charles was discovered. That is where the opening of the Wynn Hotel was. Ella Fitzgerald. When Louis Armstrong came to Jacksonville, he stayed there in the hotel. He said that on Ashley Street, because that's where it's happening. So he stayed there. So the impact of having someone like Louis Armstrong stay there, Ella Fitzgerald be there, Ray Charles being discovered there, it's a big part of the culture as well in the forming of music in the country.
And I want to listen to a little bit of a song called Seaboard Stomp. But Tim, you talk a little bit about his connection when he was in Jacksonville to the trains.
Mm-hmm.
That was a big porter culture here. Of course, that was the first union, the Red Caps that was unionized here by Philip Randolph. And so there's a rich history when it comes to trains in the Black community.
Yeah. Trains are all through his music, and absolutely, whether it's Tampa Bound or Seaboard Stomp. And he probably worked out at the. There was a year or two that he lived out east.
Yeah,
he moved from West Union Street. There was a line of shotgun houses that was demolished a couple of decades ago, but then he moved out east on Union Street also, and was probably working for the Union Terminal warehouse out there, which is now, what is it called now? It's just been restored.
Apartments,
condos.
Yeah, condos, apartments.
So, but yeah, the trains are all over his music, and yeah.
And I'm going to ask Adonica to tell us a little bit more about Seaboard Stomp and maybe have us play it out. But in terms of the research that you've done, Tim, just to kind of wrap that up, obviously you've written a couple of blog posts about him. He's important to you. Just your takeaways on this 100th anniversary of his recording contribution.
He's so significant to blues history, to music history, but also to this town. And when I first started my website 14 years ago, jackpsychogeo.com, Blind Blake was one of the first subjects that I wrote about there. And I just recently wrote this newer story where I try and track him as many places as possible where he lived across Jacksonville. Growing up here, I often felt like, people say, what happens in Las Vegas stays in Las Vegas. Well, in a very different way, it often felt like what happened in Jacksonville stayed in Jacksonville because Jacksonville just was not good at telling its story. And it seemed like there's something emblematic to me about the way that Blind Blake is known outside of Jacksonville, and yet certainly Adonica and the Ritz and the Eartha White Museum and Jerry Urso, lots of people celebrate Blind Blake, but the city itself still needs to tell its story better. There is, with all due respect to football and beaches, there's more to Jacksonville,
Yeah. Adonica, we're going to let the Seaboard Stomp play us out here. But for people who are interested, again, you run a museum where this is sort of your bread and butter, but what is it? How would you like people to learn more about this period, this artist, or just Jacksonville's influence on music and culture?
I definitely encourage you to look Blind Blake up, listen to his music, especially if you love music. Just what we've heard today, you could hear the talent of him playing. Even what he played then, you could hear it now. It's playing. He's influenced what we hear now. So I encourage you to take the time to really research the music legacy of Jacksonville, the Black community. I mean, also Southern rock, all that stuff. Jacksonville has not. I agree with Gilmore that we have not told our own story. Everybody else knows our story but us. And so that's why you hear people say, nothing happens in Jacksonville. Yeah, you're listening to blues, jazz. It was formulated, grown, nurtured by individuals who were here, from Blind Blake to John Rosamond Johnson and others. And the idea that Bessie Smith, Ma Rainey, Jelly Roll Morton had their roots here. And when they go out, they mention that Jacksonville is a big part of their career. And we don't, children who go to Douglas Anderson School of the Arts, La Villa School of the Arts, and they don't hear about that, that is something that should change. I'm just saying, because if you're going to go to New York and perform, you're going to hear John Rosamond's name and James Weldon Johnson's name. Don't go be from Jacksonville and not know the people from Jacksonville that impact New York.
Yeah. Well, Adonica Toller, Tim Gilmore, great to talk to you.